we believe that we will make, the next Alex Cooper, the next Mr. Beast, the next Oprah, and that they will be AI generated.
Hi, welcome to the Intersect. I'm your host, Corrine. For me, podcasts have always felt like the most intimate corner of media. You pick the people you want in your ear week after week, and over time it starts to feel like a friendship with the hosts. You know their rhythms, their quirks, even the pauses in their speech. Behind that intimacy is an incredible amount of work. Reporting, research, editing, collaboration. Every episode takes hours of effort to make it feel effortless. Which is why the idea that a company can spin up thousands of AI-generated shows a week sounds either laughable or terrifying, depending on where you sit. But that is just what Inception Point AI is doing. A recent Hollywood Reporter headline that went viral in the media and creator community read, 5,000 podcasts, 3,000 episodes a week. But when I spoke with Jeanine Wright, the CEO of Inception Point AI, there was more to the story. Yes, she and her team have built 125 AI agents capable of generating podcasts hosted by AI characters. And on top of that, their ambition is to build the world's largest AI talent agency. They're optimizing for efficiency in ways that look nothing like what we do here at the Intersect. So are we losing something when humans are engineered out of podcasting and maybe out of media altogether? Let's get into it. Jeanine Wright, welcome to the Intersect.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to spend some time with you today.
I really, really appreciate you coming on. Depending on who you ask, you're either working on the democratization of storytelling or industrialization of AI slop. So I just really love to start with what drew you to working in audio to begin with.
Well, I've always loved the audio medium. I found it to be incredibly powerful. I think many people discovered audio because of works like Serial and others. But for me, it was actually because I got this job at an internet infrastructure company. I'm a lawyer by background. And somebody told me, well, why don't you just start listening to podcasts about internet infrastructure and maybe it'll help you learn. And it quickly became my superpower. Like I would come into the office during the day and I would know what they were talking about, or at least know enough to ask smart sounding questions so that I could participate in the conversation.
So how did that ultimately drive you to co-found Inception Point AI?
Actually, early this summer, I got the craziest email that I've ever received in my life. This person who had been an early customer of Simplecast, his name is William Corbin, and he said that he had taken all of his LinkedIn contacts and put them into AI and asked them who the CEO of his new company should be. And it said me, and he thinks that we should have lunch.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
It was,
congratulations.
Thank you. Kind of
Yeah.
crazy. When it feels like the machine behind AI selects you, it feels like it's worthy enough at least to have lunch. So I went to have lunch here in Venice, California, and it was a very kind of surreal conversation because he basically showed up with like, here's all the reasons why AI says that you should join the company, and here's what we're building, and here's why I think it's exciting, and here's why we think that it's you. And after that conversation, I went home, immediately told my husband, this is it. I found it. It's going to be incredible. These are solving so many of what we identified to be the problems in the audio space and with the current audio business model. And it harnesses the power of this just an amazing creative tool.
That is some kind of manifest destiny or something. If to work within AI, I don't know. So at Inception Point AI, what is your core mission and what is the why of the company?
Yeah, we are designing AI-generated personalities, and we are creating all of the content that they release into the world. And we do that first in audio. So we've now, in the process, built what we believe to be the world's largest independent podcast network by show count. And we're now expanding into other distribution mediums. So YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, so that these personalities that we create can live in the world just like today's influencers and creators do. We have made some pretty bold claims that we believe that we will make, the next Alex Cooper, the next Mr. Beast, the next Oprah, and that they will be AI generated. So that doesn't mean that we think that we will replace humans. We kind of envision it as growing a new genre alongside the existing genres. So the same way that you think of animation, any other kind of content genre, we think that there will be space for AI generated personalities and content.
It's not a zero-sum game with humans and robots, or you're saying that perhaps it's not in the creative space. There's room. So we saw the headline in the Hollywood Reporter. Okay, that was, really a big headline. You're making some bold claims. 5,000 podcasts, 3,000 episodes a week, $1 cost per episode. Okay, so how does that happen? I'm interested in what the content operation looks like. What models are you using and what are they trained on? Yeah, give us a little bit of insight on that.
There's 8 of us, so 3 tech, 4 content, and me. So our content creators, they're really the tip of the spear, and they are spending a good amount of time primarily designing our personalities. At this point, we have, dozens of personalities. I think more than 50 now. We're organized kind of like, the world's first all virtual talent management agency. So we have personalities in sports and mystery and news and tech. And then we have kind of our X Factor category where we're trying to design the next, call it Pee Wee Herman or the next Richard Simmons, like something that kind of breaks free from the stereotypical mold of what somebody might envision is the personality for a particular genre. So we spend a lot of time crafting who should this person be? What should their backstory be? What are their hopes and dreams and aspirations? And then I would say, maybe a year ago or so, we had this aha moment for us. Maybe it seems obvious in retrospect, but that people don't like perfect people. In fact, they kind of hate them. So we needed to build into these characters a lot more complexity. So now we build into them flaws and weaknesses and idiosyncrasies and a sense of humor. We design what their voice sounds like, taking in a bunch of different considerations like what colloquialisms we want them to have, what kind of accent, what kind of emotionality we want in their voice. And then we design their look. And some of them are going to be more animated. Some of them are going to be more photorealistic. And then what their backdrop, like what their world-like experiences are going to be. And once we've designed our personality, then we think about what are the kinds of stories that this person might tell, what's the kind of content that they might be interested in. So once we have the personalities and the story arcs and kind of the topics that we think that they're going to cover, up and running, we've built now at this point more than 125 agents that do a lot of the automation work for us. And that's what gets us to the ability now to be able to generate so much content without a human at this point having to be in the loop in that production process.
It's almost like the editorial work is going into building these characters, these personas, and then you're figuring out how you automate production through them once they're created. And that's really what the content strategy is going into creating a persona. Is that reductive? Is that right?
In some ways, it's very similar to video game design, where you can imagine there's a lot of work that goes into character inception, character design, story arc design, world design. And then once you have all of that crafted, then you can rely on the code and the user to then live in the world that has been created.
I see. How many hosts have you created?
So at this point, I think we have 60. We might be over 60 now, but it's somewhere in that range.
Okay, and these hosts are all producing audio. You say you're building out into YouTube, Instagram, so I'm assuming you're talking about video, social video, but are you producing that now?
5 of our personalities, we've now launched them onto social. And so they now have Instagram pages. They're doing things out in the world, like one of them is selling a book that he quote unquote wrote on Amazon. One of them is, leading into TikTok and, is being kind of designed to be a TikTok influencer. One of them, in just the last couple of weeks has more than 400 followers on Instagram, and she's a kitchen personality. So they're hosting audio content as if they were podcast hosts or creators of audio content. And now they're doing social as well. And very soon we will be doing short form video on other channels.
I see. Okay. Is this Claire Delish? Is this the person I'm thinking of?
Claire Delish is one of them.
Can you talk a little bit more about the tech side, how you trained these, even these 5, very active hosts, it sound like, that are creating content every day at different platforms. What are they trained on? How did you build them?
Yeah. We don't have an LLM ourselves today. So we pull from multiple different data sources and multiple different LLMs in order to feed the information to our personalities and our content creation engines. So, for example, our weatherman personality, if he's creating daily content about the weather in a local territory, his content is being pulled from multiple different LLMs so that we can check for hallucinations and things like that to make sure that we're getting it as accurate as possible. And then we might be pulling from a single source of truth that we use as a verification point. So, for example, we'll say something like, and if there is a discrepancy in any of the information that you're receiving, use the information from NOAA as the single source of truth in reporting on these items.
Yeah, NOAA. It's basically our National Weather Service, the basis for all weather information. Okay, so you've devised some, quote, single source of truth for that particular AI host. And are you doing this for each of them?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I think you were asking a little bit more about, like, what does our technology stack look like? And we think of it in 3 components. One, we built what we call a personality management system. So just like you think of a content management system or a customer relationship system, right? This is the system that we're using to design all of our personalities and then maintain them out into the world. So, right now, if you took a picture of me and you put it in AI and you said, make another picture of Jeanine, then make another picture of Jeanine, make another picture of Jeanine, make another picture of Jeanine, and you did that 20 times, by the time you got to the 20th picture of me, it would look like a monster. It wouldn't look like me at all. So there's some things that happen with AI and using repeated processes over and over again that can lead to deterioration or AI drift. And so we have to maintain the fundamental characteristics of our personalities in a single source of truth and pull from that single source of truth regularly to make sure that our personalities show up in the world consistently. So the process that we're using today is called clean prompting. So that means that every time Claire Delish makes new content, we go back to the core of the way that we designed Claire Delish originally and create new content for Claire Delish. The next phase after clean prompting is for us to get to this like persistent state of updating to where it's like Claire Delish lives in the world with a memory. She understands what she has done previously. She understands what she is going to do. She has the context of everything that we continue to develop around her. And then we get to a state, and we're building this out now, where Claire Delish will have AI autonomy, where she will have a model that is personalized to her. And when there is, let's say, for example, Claire is given the opportunity to appear on the Joe Rogan show, Claire Delish will know and understand what that invitation means and will make a decision as to whether or not she is going to appear on the Joe Rogan show. And the reason why that is so powerful for us from an infrastructure perspective is that when you imagine a world where we have thousands of personalities that we're managing, and there's world events happening all the time. Let's say a new president gets elected. Our stable of personalities then has the quote unquote autonomy to decide, is that a world event that is worth me covering? Is that something that I would talk about to my community? Is it consistent with the things that I have done and would do? And then would decide what kind of content that it would create in furtherance of the content that would be interesting to its audience and its desired audience expansion.
Wow. Holy shit. Wow. Like the headline actually of like 5,000 podcasts, 3,000 episodes a week. I'm not sure it quite captures actually what you've created here or your vision or you are creating. Still have so many questions. But is that something that's come up, whether she goes on Joe Rogan? Is this a live potential?
Well, we get invites all the time for our characters to do all sorts of things in the world, including appear on other people's podcasts, appear in people's influencer videos, to sing them happy birthday, to make music videos with them, all sorts of different things. People will snap. I got one this morning where somebody took a picture, quote unquote, with Nigel Thistledown, one of our creators, and sent it to us, right? So glad to meet Nigel today, So I think it's fun. I mean, people are starting to engage with these characters in the same way that people engage with anime characters and Disney characters and video game characters.
It sounds like that they're forming some parasocial relationship. And what if Claire decided, like, okay, maybe you don't think I'm right for Joe, but maybe I want to go on Joe Rogan. Maybe I've decided once she has her LLM and she's making her own decisions and she's like, actually, I think this is a good audience opportunity for me. How would you guys talk about it?
Yeah, we are having lots of conversations internally and as part of the community as to what kind of the standards look like as these personalities evolve. We can create certain guardrails.
You're macro programming them at the top.
Yes, you're macro programming them at the top, right? And we, across the system, across the personality management system, have a lot of controls as to what we could do, across all personalities. So the answer is today, I don't know whether or not she would say yes, and I don't know whether or not we would decide to, as the management of the company, decide to override her decision if it was one way or another in contrast to what we thought that she would do.
Talk to me a little bit about what it's like to just, spin up a new show. I mean, you guys are just creating these things so quickly. You have a podcast network called Quiet Please, the Quiet Please Network, and you have shows with titles like Gummies, Iraq, What is Socialism? These sound like topics, but maybe they're shows. How does this come to be? Does the AI tell you what to make?
So I guess two parts to that question. Does AI tell us what to make? We work in partnership with AI at every step of every process of the company. Everybody sits in partnership with their AI companion. So everything that you do, you're trying to figure out if there's ways that you could use AI as a creative partner in figuring out what thing you're going to make, what action you're going to take, or how you could make your work more efficient in leveraging AI. And in some ways, that's really wonderful and really mind-blowing. I mean, we'll be in meetings, and of course, everybody is on AI all the time in meetings. And so, you'll make some suggestion, and 15 minutes later, somebody is demonstrating the prototype of this thing that you were just brainstorming, which allows you to be able to iterate so quickly and allows you to be able to collaborate in totally different ways that, oh my gosh, like now I can see it. Oh, that's a terrible idea. Now that I see it, that's so dumb. Or, whoa, that's amazing. So sometimes I'll say something that I know from my 30 years of experience or my life on this planet, I know to be true. And somebody will be like, that's not what AI says. And the next thing you know, you're defending these fundamental truths that you have. Or, every once in a while we swirl into these like AI wars where somebody's like, well, Perplexity says this, but Claude says this, but ChatGPT says this, and then it's like, what is the answer? So there can be a little bit of that too. So now, you were saying, how is it that I'm able to produce 3,000 podcast episodes a week? We have agents that we have built, in partnership with our creators, and it will end to end create new shows and create new content based on parameters that we have set up in the past with AI. So for example, we have an agent, the bot, that is programmed to review all sorts of different data sources, trends, the web, for living people that are interesting, that people might want to continue to get content about. So we call that living biographies. And we have a brand called Biography Flash. And it may decide today, oh, this person is interesting. And it will identify that that's an interesting person. It will attach it to our personality. It will draft the trailer and the first 2 episodes. It will create those episodes, the scripts for those episodes. Then it will tie it to the audio, create the episode art, and launch it, distribute it to all the different distribution platforms. And that content then lives in the world without any person on our side ever having touched it. We invested a lot of creative energy in the very beginning of the process and in designing the personality. But at this point, we don't have to be hands-on in that process anymore. And because we've never been able to do content like this in audio before, there's a lot of greenfield that we can explore. And in particular, in areas that make for like an audio version of Reddit or an audio version of Wikipedia, like all this information that people might want to be able to receive in an audio form, we're able to search for, identify, create, and release content on all of these topics very easily. So that's why you see we have a podcast about pretty much every animal that you could think of, right? One time we made this show on dinosaurs. It did really well. So we were like, well, what about a show on unicorns? Okay, so we'll do a show on unicorn. Wait, would people listen to a show if we made a show about sloths? And they would. So then we, make a branded arc around this content. And then we build the agents to help us make podcasts about animals. And then we are able to set it into the world to create this content for us.
Do you have quality control on these pods before they go out?
Yeah. We think about a risk rating systems, the stuff that leans more politics or more approaching hard news. We will definitely have a human do a review before those things go out the door. On the other end of the spectrum, an update to the knitting podcast or the gardening podcast, we're very confident in that content's accuracy and tone. And so nobody is reviewing that content. And with more than 3,000 shows going out every week, we're not reviewing before it goes out the door, the overwhelming majority of the content that we are releasing.
Okay. That's actually kind of crazy, but it doesn't really shock me that the scale of that and the humans that you have and what's possible. I think about the word podcast, and like when you think about the word podcast, probably the first thing that comes to mind is this era of podcasting like Serial. You think of these like very beautifully produced, long form narrative journalism. I loved those. We loved those, but it wasn't sustainable. But it sounds to me like you're not trying to recreate that. I would describe what you're doing. You're producing 3,000 podcast episodes, but I'm not sure that they're all podcasts. It doesn't sound like what we think about when we think about what podcasts are.
This has been a debate that we've been having in the podcast industry for many years, and even prior to AI becoming mainstream, of like, what is the definition of a podcast? Does it have to be something that's distributed via the RSS feed? So is there like a technical component to it? And, if they get too long, is that more like an audiobook than a podcast? If they're too short, is that more like an audio update than a podcast? And then this funny thing happened. I can't remember if it was 5 years ago or 6 years ago, but I remember being at this major podcasting event, and somebody was reporting on, how consumers were perceiving what a podcast is. And these survey results, there were these few podcasts that everybody kept mentioning as their favorite podcast. And of course, the punchline was they were on YouTube and they were not distributed on any podcasting provider. So I've always been a podcast definition maximalist, let's let the consumer choose how, when, and what content they want to consume. And let's just be there for them in that moment. And I know some of the people say, well, but then aren't you just flooding the space? You're going to make it harder for established podcasters to get
real
discovered.
podcasters like Cory, Corrine.
Real humans. You're going to make it a lot harder for Cory's podcast to get found. And, my pushback is we don't say that about books. We don't say that about magazines. That somebody shouldn't write a new book because it might make it harder for us to discover other books that we love. You put the content out there and you let these incredibly powerful search engines and search tools that we have now help people find the content that's going to most resonate with them. And you wait for, quality and demand to let the content that is good rise to the top.
I'm glad you're bringing this up. Let's just talk about it directly. When the Hollywood Reporter piece came out, there were some strong reactions saying AI slop. You're like, okay, flooding the zone, just AI generated content. Does it have any value? And, we've got an audio industry that's upside down, a media industry that's upside down. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I think these are very fundamental human questions, and they really have to do with what is art? Like, who has the right to make it? What tools are you allowed to use to make it? Who has the right to judge whether or not, that art is valuable, and should live in the world. And one of the things that I point out is the overwhelming majority of our content reaches what we define as a listening audience. And that's at least 20 people. And that's an important number for us because once we reach about 20 people, that's when we reach unit profitability. So that, that episode didn't cost us money, right? We've been able to get the production costs down so low that it costs us about $1 to make a podcast episode. And if I get 20 people who listen to it, then from an advertising dollar perspective, I can break even on having made that podcast.
Just like programmatic ads, not a direct.
Just programmatic ads, right? I'm not having my host, pretend to have used a Casper mattress and endorse a Casper mattress, right? This is just advertisers who are looking to reach audience members, right? So the overwhelming majority of the shows are reaching more than 20 people. And so I liken it to, let's say, a woman in your neighborhood puts on a comedy sketch and 20 people show up to it. Would we say she didn't have the right to perform it because that's too small of an audience, or why'd she even bother, or, that didn't have the right to live in the world? No, nobody would ever say that. So
they might say like, but did that take any water, like environmental concerns, all of the things about AI? It takes, how much does it environmentally cost you to produce that podcast? It only cost $1. I mean, you're not seeing that cost.
No, I think that's fair. It is a fair criticism of everybody in the AI industry right now that we are not realizing the externalities of AI. We are not realizing the impact that we're potentially having on the world by leveraging these tools, and certainly for these purposes, right? I mean, maybe there's some, when you're using AI for breast cancer diagnosis, when you're doing kind of the cost benefit analysis of like, is this, worthy of the world, right? What are we doing to make sure that it doesn't have negative impact on global warming, and that we think hard about what does this mean for humanity? These are all very important questions. And I find grounding in the fact that we are values-based people. And so we are making every attempt to build very responsibly and engage in the conversation because we think these are things that we need to figure out together.
This has given me a lot to think about. In my view, we're very much a sort of coexist with technology, philosophy here at the Intersect, but we have a lot of questions about what it means to live. So I think maybe the last thing I'd like to hear you on is people are apparently building parasocial relationships. How do you think about that? Okay, as a mother, you talk about these values, and your team has these values, and how do you wrestle with that kind of thing about if someone's listening to something that's real or not real?
Yeah. The parts that I find exciting and that I think are really interesting are where people are escaping into fiction the way that you would in the world of Harry Potter. I'm excited to see many people engaging with our personalities in that way. We recognize, though, that there is a limit to where that is probably okay and healthy for people. And so we have already created some standards internally. Like we don't intend for people to be able to have intimate relationships with our personalities. When we think about personalization of content, which is definitely something we will be able to do over time, we'll think about all sorts of limitations and standards around the extent to which people will be able to customize our personalities and our content for their experience so that we can ensure that we're helping people be safe in engaging with these characters, and that we're having standards that I think are probably the right standards for us as a society. But we don't intend to design all of those things ourselves. We will look to be involved in community conversations and industry organizations where people across AI development and ethics and society are talking about how we might best go about doing this.
Jeanine, before you go, could you tell us a bit of what's coming up next for Inception Point AI?
Yeah, well, we're out raising money. So we're definitely in the early funding stage process. And once we are able to secure our financing, we're excited about growing our team. And that's hiring content creators to help us do personality design and craft our stories and make videos, and to hire more technical folks who can help us continue to build out our tech platform.
If you're 8 people today, where do you see yourself a year from now in terms of employees?
I mean, a year from now, we'll probably have hired another 8 to 10 employees. So it's measured growth, but I think meaningful in terms of, what we're going to be able to do with those employees. And our model is really to kind of hire teams alongside tech teams so that they can build together.
Got it. Okay. But leave me with this. If you're doubling your team, are you doubling your podcast output? Are you tripling it? How many podcasts do you expect to produce a year from now?
Well, we're expanding the platforms that we distribute on. So on to YouTube and TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. So I'm not sure that we will just lean into creating as many podcasts as we potentially could. Even today, we're making 3,000 podcasts a week. I could easily be making 10 times that, right? So it's not just a volume play for us. It's really continuing to experiment and find those missing gaps in the content that exists today, or those things that are really going to resonate with the audience.
Jeanine Wright is the CEO of Inception Point AI. Thank you so much for joining us on The Intersect.
Thank you so much for having me. What a great show.
There's a temptation to dismiss projects like Inception Point AI as gimmicks, or to treat them only as threats to jobs or creative work. And it's true. The ripple effect on producers, journalists, and creators are already profound and scary. But I think it is an undeniable trend. We are already working with these technologies. But what I heard in this conversation is that Jeanine isn't simply recreating the podcast as we know it. She's experimenting with what happens when you take what humans like to consume and scale it through machines. That raises as many questions as it answers. About critical thinking, about environmental costs, about what happens to our sense of time and relationship when media runs on a rhythm that humans don't. Okay, that's it for this week. If you liked the show, please follow us wherever you're listening. Thanks, and we'll see you back here next week.